Thank you all for being here. Thank you for staying. And without further ado, let me introduce to you yet again the producer of the film, Billem Smithem, and the director, Sean Penn. We are very privileged to have our guests here, and we are going to involve the audience with the questions. We should have about half an hour, maybe a little longer, and this Q&A will be conducted in English. However, if you are Polish and if you'd like to ask a question in Polish, we will translate to English and vice versa, so don't feel inconvenienced by that fact. Gentlemen, congratulations on your film, and in your introduction to the movie, you said a few words about how this project evolved from wanting to make a movie about an actor who became president and then the war started. But if you can elaborate on that a little bit, because I suspect that some of the decisions you were making sort of on the fly, trying to adjust to the situation as it was evolving.
So the film started as a kind of human interest piece on President Zelensky, and I always put it like it was if Martin Sheen had run for office after the West Wing, this would be a nice little human story we could do about this gentleman. And that was kind of the original idea. And a bunch of incidents happened, the phone call with Trump being one, and the meeting on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. And it became more interesting as we went along. Sean had been, I talked to Sean about this when I had first made some contact with people from the president's office, some people from the administration that were interested in telling Zelensky's story as a candidate and as a new president. And I had talked to Sean about it, and he was very intrigued with Zelensky as a character, even back in 2020. But because of COVID and a number of other issues, we got delayed. And eventually, it kind of, continued to morph the storyline until we started to. Sean was doing a great deal of research. He had a Zoom call with the president before we could, because of COVID, before we could travel into Ukraine. And Sean had made it very clear with the president that he wasn't going to undertake this project until they could meet face to face. He could, the president could kind of suss out Sean, and Sean could be charming and win him over to want to participate and partner in this film. But because of COVID and other issues, scheduling, we couldn't get there in person. But Sean had said, look, once we meet and we shake hands and we decide to do this, we'll do this. We went over initially in November of 2021, November 2021, in the hopes that we were going to sit with President Zelensky and have that face-to-face meeting. But because of some other issues that were going on with the administration, and obviously already issues with Russia, we didn't get the meeting. But we had a very eventful, interesting trip anyways. We started shooting, we were doing a lot of research. We traveled to Mariupol, we traveled to the front lines now that have been in Donetsk, that have now been occupied by Russia. Spent a lot of time with professors, philosophers, artists, musicians in Kyiv, and began to really kind of just get a ground truth for what it was like as a couple of Americans discovering Ukraine. And then I'll let you take it from there, because then it changed.
Well, yeah, it changed as you just saw, and as it turned out, we weren't able to get there until mid-February 2022. And then, as would be expected, you have to, when meeting with the head of state, one should keep their schedule a little bit flexible. And it happened that that first meeting, as we talk about in the film, happened on the 23rd. And when we got back to prepare for the first day of shooting, it all started.
So if initially this was more of a human interest story in the president of Ukraine, at what point did your embrace of the Ukrainian cause and your special connection with the people of Ukraine sort of kick in?
Well, it's very much, again, I'm cognizant that the film's just shown and you've seen it, and so I repeat myself a little bit, so I'll keep it very brief. It was really, you know, throughout our lives, we think about that cathartic moment, that something that would process something with a real clarity in a strong way, rather than in the kind of trickles that usually come with change or revelations of things to us. And there was very much the case that between November 2021 and February 2022, a unity of an entire country and culture had come so strongly together that had only been a promise that had never been fulfilled in my own experience, in my own country. And to be in a country of that kind of unity, in a country that was a community in that sense, was the first time that I recognized, I think, that internally how much one really needs that. You know, there's a lot of times where we think about what is a need and what is a want and what is a luxury and what is a necessity. And increasingly, I think that you know, mental health has become a much more talked about issue around the world and a lot in the United States. And I think that you know, mental health relies on community, and I found that despite the horrible reasons behind so much, you know, the tragedy that came to Ukraine's door, that within that there's something that was extremely humanly being fulfilled in a core way. And so, yeah, that was the biggest part of the experience of making this film.
What were you hoping to achieve through the making of this film? We all love documentary cinema, but realistically speaking, how much of a difference can a single movie make?
Well, I think whenever we make a movie, if we don't think it's the most important thing in the world, we shouldn't be doing it. And that doesn't mean that we think it's the most important thing in the world. It's just that we are going to commit to it as though it is. And if it turns out to be of any import, we're very lucky. I want it to be. But the target, I think, here, for me, and that Billy and I talked about a lot, was to make this to begin with, the American audience. Because we suffer such division and such breakdown of community or fair-minded spirit or equity of spirit, intellectually as well as socioeconomically. We belittle each other. It's nasty and cheap and pedantic and increasingly boring, and that'll create mental health issues more than anything. And so there's also something about making a film that doesn't suffer from, I'm going to make this for me, and if it extends to others, great. which is probably both empowered and plagued most of my history of any involvement in film. This was really to try to talk to the many people in my country that care, or that are inclined to care. And by care, I don't mean a kind of weepy embrace, but recognition that it matters, that certain principles matter, that we're being normalized out of so often. And so, to the degree it can have impact, I can't measure, but I'm determined to get as many eyes and ears on the film as possible, and may it just be a Trojan horse to continue the conversation, especially when there are other dramatic things happening in the world. But we ought to be able to walk and chew gum and dance and laugh all together, and maybe a few other things, and make films at a high level.
But also kill when necessary, or the quote from William Saroyan at least suggested as much. At one point of the movie, you went to the front lines, even though you were warned that your life may be in danger. Why did you feel that you had to do it? And did you really feel that you could lose your life right there and then?
So this is sort of I can't hear a question like that without thinking about the citizens who are locked in places like that, the soldiers who are compelled to fight in places like that, and the journalists that go out and are there a lot longer, and it just becomes a sort of embarrassing conversation to have. I felt it was very important to the film that we extend that to there. But I was statistically in absolutely no danger. It's, you know, what you would have heard of the warning is just, you know, what can happen, you know, and the cautions and protectiveness that they had of someone that I think they've considered more of a guest than a, you know, an investigative journalist.
Well, I'm going to ask just one more question, because I'm sure that they have a lot, and the question is going to be a very different one, but I'm extremely curious about it. Hypothetically speaking, would you like to interview Vladimir Putin, and how do you think this meeting would go?
I would be interested in interviewing anyone that is interesting. There is no more boring, deceptive, robotic, unnuanced, overrated brain on the planet than this beast called Putin, and I have no interest.
Thank you very much for a very clear answer, and let's go to the questions. I'll try to keep track of whose hands I see up. There's one near the top that I see. There's also one in the middle, in the upper front, in the upper rows, but the microphone is down here. Let's go there, and then I'll move to the other side.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. Let me just begin by saying one more time, Slava Ukraini. Heroям Slava.
Can you stand up, please, so you can be seen, because you can hardly see it.
And now just a classical technique question. How many hours of material have you shot, and were there any fragments that you were particularly sorry to cut out? Just a simple one, I hope.
I can tell you that it was, let's see, I would say half the hours that we were there, and we made many trips there, and they're long trips. I don't know, do you know how many feet? Yeah, over that. Over 1,000 hours, and all of it is subject to use at another time and another way. Part of the point, the attack on this was I'd never made a documentary before, and I asked myself many times, you know, how can it be value added? I'm a huge documentary film fan. Maybe addict is a better word. And there's so many extraordinary documentaries to be found and see, and I knew that a lot of films were being made. Evgeny Afanevsky made his follow-up film to Winter on Fire in the same period of time, Freedom on Fire, which is an extraordinary film, and they're a really extraordinary film that needs to be seen. But these were all very different beasts, and I thought in terms of value added, the kind of film that I could make would have more to do with not avoiding something I'd always avoided, because when I had traveled in places of interest or met with people of interest in the past, I'd done my best in most cases to avoid records of it. There's a, as I talk about in this film, there's an immediate perception that limits your ability to function because you're perceived as being an actor from Hollywood who's trying to get a picture taken with a dying baby and, you know, all of that stuff immediately. And especially when you have to negotiate things, it's hard to blackmail people when you're on camera. They're not as easy to win over as would have happened in places like Haiti with some of the organizations that bank charitable dollars and don't do so necessarily so efficiently many times. So you have conversations that you can dominate, that need to be dominated when there's not a camera there. But I also had felt that, you know, maybe it was time to do something like this and offer the person who might not have the access I had, or maybe not the freedom to travel for whatever reason, the ability to kind of come along and see, because it's basically about brokering a trust, and by being trustworthy. So I knew I could have a camera, I could broker a trust, and I could be trustworthy, and just have someone maybe be less guarded than they might be, or, but also take anyone that wanted to along on the access that I had. And, you know, none of it's very proactive. I'm not I've never been much of a question asker. I learn more by just being around and taking things in, and I felt maybe the audience could do that with me. I might bring a lot of opinion into it, but in editing the film, it was very important to me to sometimes shut my mind out of my thoughts and just say, is there also an opportunity for an audience to just see what I saw with me? And my answer was yes, and that was what was important, because I was going to try to be talking to people, again, circling back to the United States target. A lot of the audience that we want for this film do not agree with me politically on anything. But I like to think that it still has something to offer them.
Thank you. The question at the very top, if the microphone is there.
Can you hear me clearly? Okay, good. Hello, good evening. I'm a cinematographer. I come from Kiev. I came here just a week ago to present my film here at the festival, and I'll be back to Kiev on a Monday. And most of the things that you show in your movie, I actually have seen and experienced myself in person. And right now, I really want to thank you, dear Sean, first of all, for your film and strong position in support of my country. And I also would like to praise you and your crew for your honesty, your courage, and your devotion as a filmmaker, as an artist, and as a human being.
Thank you.
Yes, there's one thing I really like to ask you. So right now,
I can't find it.
Yeah.
Oh.
Here I am, too far away. So right now it's been practically a year since you've done shooting of this film, as I understand. And what we see right now, that due to, well, a lot of circumstances, but one and most important of them is, let's be honest, is insufficient and delayed military support for Ukraine from Western countries and particularly from US. The war got into a new phase and it's going to be a war of exhaustion. And my question to you would be, what is your vision, your fears, and your hopes for the future of Ukraine right now? Thank you.
Well, as I have felt from the beginning, we've been the country I am a voter in, have been far too cautious, and I think we've taken it to the point of a brand of national cowardice. I think it's a shameful chapter in American history, and I suppose I just hope that all the engines of strength can find their voice. I'd like this film to play whatever small part it can play in that, to remind Americans of the obligation that their aspiration demands. I still do not see any world where Russia will ultimately prevail, but because so many people are dying and suffering and so much, there's going to be so much collateral damage going forward. A lot of Americans who, I've been, for the first time that I am aware of, been called a hawk for my belief that we should be supporting Ukraine 2 years ago with F-16s and other air defenses and everything it takes to win this thing, and it would have been won by now. And by won, I think it's won because Russia will fracture from inside. There's not just one Russia, there's a Russia that's already dying. And so that'll be its own complication for the world to help heal. But in the meantime, with the heroes of freedom fighting on the front lines in Ukraine, the Ukrainians will not be beaten. And so what, like I say in the film, I'm going to be around in a couple of years, and I'm very happy to have these words thrown back at me, and I say it again, the Ukrainians will not be beaten. And so Russia's in a fool's game for its own survival. And one person is doing it for short-term political gain because that's all he needs. And the world's letting it happen. And so, will it change? I don't know. With the United States right now, it seems to be the Republicans who are ready to put the capital C in cowardice. But the actual politics of these people, when you talk to them, they're all, want to call themselves supporters of Ukraine. And, but I think it's just a sign of how soft we've gotten, how resolve and pride and courage are pictures of our past, and it's a past that can be recovered. It can be recovered very quickly, but it's going to have to take voices, ours, others, to just demand it, so that again, and I know I'm talking on and on, but when I go back to this mental health issue, if I'm a teenager in the United States of America and I have seen all the Ukrainian flags put out in front of the homes, and I've seen everybody on the left, on the right, and they're saying, we're with Ukraine, we're going to be with Ukraine to the end, and then they're saying, maybe not so much, and maybe these guys should pay more for this, and maybe I'm looking at my parents and my leaders, and I'm saying, you don't believe in fucking anything. And so the hell with thought and you, and it's a complete betrayal of children's minds, souls, and any pride that they can have in their community or call that country. So I I hope there are a lot of movies and a lot of voices to wake up leadership. And frankly, I think it would be a political win for either side that suddenly came to the plate and was decisive in support of Ukraine. Thank you.
There is a lady in the middle, and there is a gentleman on the right side. If few seats down, yes, thank you.
Hi, thanks so much for this film. Yeah, it was very powerful and very, in my opinion, true. I'm also shooting my own documentary at the moment. It's almost finished. It's also about Ukraine. I'm focusing more on the lives of the refugees in different countries. I've shot in Germany, the UK, and Brazil. And one of the biggest difficulties I faced in pre-production was people saying that Zelensky is an American puppet. And some of the DPs didn't even want to work with me because of that reason. So I was just wondering what you think about that. Thank you.
You want me?
Okay, you can add. You know, as you saw in the film, we went out of our way to talk to a lot of people before the war and after the invasion. And initially, you know, especially in Kyiv, there were very few people that said they voted for Zelensky. And at one moment, I remember when the president, after watching the movie, said, "I won by 74%, and you couldn't find, you know, anyone on the street that voted for me." But he wasn't at that time a president of the elites of Kyiv, of the cities. He was a president of the people in the country. And then you see a little bit of this in the film as well, that when we went back, that a lot of people that had questions about, you know, Zelensky, his loyalty, never mind the United States, there was a lot of talk when we were first there that, look, he's a child of Eastern Ukraine. He's a Russian speaker. He made his money and his success in the Russo Mir, in the Russian world. Like, you know, this is not our guy. And I think that all of us have seen him go beyond our expectations, beyond our, you know, for many people, many of the Ukrainian patriots that for generations have been about Ukraine, who have changed their opinions. I can't speak to your refugees that you're interviewing, but many people that we have talked to a year and a half ago, who didn't vote for Zelensky, and didn't have great hopes for his success. And even though if they still might feel that there's other people that they would vote for in the future, have nothing but amazing respect and admiration for him now and for what he's done. During one interview, we talked about the phone call with President Trump, and he had said to me that, you know, and I had asked him straight up, you know, what is this like, this kind of pressure coming from someone like this? And this was actually before the war, and he had said, you know, you think that's pressure? You should look at my neighbor. That's pressure. And I think that, again, I can't, you know, we'll see in your documentary and some of these other people that have left and that are in refugee status now, but I'm amazed at the number of people that have gone 180 degrees across the Ukrainian society that have told us, on the record, off the record, that, you know, maybe it's, you know, they have their issues, but they are incredibly thankful and pleased with what he's done. So you can add a little bit.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that if he were a puppet of the United States of America in a period of time with our president's approval ratings are as low as they are as he faces a new election period, I think it's very clear that most around the world would be very, very happy to hear that and think very highly of the American leadership if they had yesterday afternoon brokered at the table the return of Crimea. If he were a puppet of the United States, he would be brokering a deal like the return of Crimea. But as a representative of Ukraine, like all Ukrainians I've met, they don't want to give up an inch of it any more than we would if our parents lived in New York and New York was taken by a foreign invader. So this is a guy, all you have to do as filmmakers is look at how genuine he is, and you recognize in, you know, and it's the best of, I think, film arts. You find people who are just not wired to be puppets of anybody. He is a representative of that country, and that country's a representative of him like nothing I've ever seen before, and they can just, you know, they're just wrong to think that, and it's a reckless thing to express if you don't know you're right, and I really feel strongly that they're wrong and therefore very reckless. You know, sometimes we don't celebrate the best among us, and we miss out. It's a great time to celebrate that man, because that man celebrates the best thing in all his citizens and in all of us.
Thank you. Gentleman on that side.
Thank you both for being here. It's to your right here at the stairs. My question concerns your role in this documentary. Have there ever been discussions about you not being on screen, present on screen, or was the idea maybe to sort of act like a representation or a stand-in for the audience, or to sort of help them confront themselves with this topic and with so much pain through like a face they recognize, through like the face of Sean Penn?
Well, we give it a Billem. It's sort of, I would say, sort of in adapting, as we sometimes have to do in film, usually because of the dough in one way or another. As it turns out, there's not a lot of a lot of money for documentaries that aren't about the husband who murdered his 6 wives in a row, or vice versa, or you know, it's like true crime. We couldn't get it financed with what we were doing, and remember, what we were doing was not this, because that build-up hadn't happened, and so this was a way to get it done, and therefore then you say, okay, so how can you make that a positive? And then it was, like I said earlier, just sort of, well, you know, if you want to jump in my backpack on this trip, come along, and then it became this what it is. So those were the stages.
Thank you. Other questions, please? There are lots of them up front. I don't know if we can come here with microphones, but we'll try. Oh, we're trying. So 2 questions near the front, starting with the lady and then the gentleman.
Hello, Sean. My name is Dominika. I'm very happy and glad to have you here. I'm live in Toruń, and that's why it's a very special moment for me that you are here, both of you. One question to Billy and another one to Sean. Billy, I'd like to know which of the scene of moment of the movie is the most important, significant for you. Is there any such a moment that is very special for you in this movie?
One thing okay, yeah, I mean, there's a number, but there's one thing that I really felt happy that we captured, because I thought it was very important. It was because I thought President Zelensky showed a different side of himself than we had seen when he was on CNN or BBC, or even when Sean had talked to him in the bunker on the first day of the war. Was I mean, it was the 3rd interview outside at the presidential palace where he, and again, you see some of it here, but I'm thinking of also of just the raw footage we had, and the ability, the way he talked about number one, his love of Ukraine, his love of freedom, his love of his experiences in New York and the United States, that really touched he talked about it as a young man, his travels, and getting to know this sense after the Soviet Union as a youth, to see this freedom in the United States. And for me, it was the kind of, and not only the sense of freedom, but the sense, let me just give one thing to talk about freedom. When we filmed this, we didn't have one minder. We never showed them kind of a script or a storyboard of what we imagined we would do. And it was an amazing experience when people talk about corruption, or they talk about control, and when you juxtapose it to Russia. The freedom we had was unbelievable. So when he spoke about the freedom that he saw in New York, and then you feel the freedom and the commitment, and as Sean had just pointed out, the connection and the solidarity that we experienced in Ukraine, that we had fantasized and almost maybe remembered in a kind of a fantasy recollection of the United States, of what we imagined the best of us and the best of our experience did. To see that in real time, in real person, was wonderful. So for me, and I don't know if it translated for all of you, but for me, seeing that, and seeing that as part of the arc of the journey of Sean's experience, and getting to meet and getting to really know the president, I was very happy with that interview, and with the way he opened up, and the way that I think we were able to see his humanity in a way that we hadn't seen in other things.
Thank you. Okay. And second short question to Sean. It's changing a topic. You are my favorite actor. Can I hug you?
I can't speak for how I smell after flying here from LA, but sure.
It's okay. Okay.
Talking about the unexpected, I'll go to this gentleman as long as you don't want to hug Sean Penn.
Thank you. Dear Sean, I have two questions. The first is, because in your movie we saw that you speak with USA government, Ukrainian government, of course, and Polish government, and did you try to speak also with Russian government and show in your movie their point of view of what is happening in Ukraine? And the second question is, you are the Hollywood superstar who support Ukraine, and I also know the star from Hollywood who is supporting Russia. I mean, Steven Seagal, who is doing this. And my question is, did you try to speak with him and show him your movie and try to convince him or show him what is the truth of this? Yeah, and this is all.
So this goes to when Billy and I had a couple of false starts on some documentaries prior to this. And one of those was, we thought an interesting story would have been how 5 years after the Arab Spring was Bashar al-Assad still standing when everyone had counted him out in 30 days. Friends and foes. And so I started making some exploratory trips to Syria, met with Assad. We were talking all the time and saying, okay, we should, and initially there was an openness to, because we wanted the same kind of freedom that we had in Ukraine, to talk to whoever we wanted to talk to, and the initial answers were yes, and then there were gatekeepers sort of saying no, and I didn't feel that I was a value added to a situation where that wasn't the way. It's not that there aren't great documentaries where people take opposition and they get cut off, they get pushed back, they hide a camera. It just probably isn't my, like I say, value added. If I got value added on this, it's because I'm going to get trust, because I'm going to be trustworthy. And by trustworthy, it doesn't mean that if, I find ugly things, I'm not going to show them. In that case, we wanted to talk, we were planning to talk to everybody immediately involved with that. And this is while even Damascus was under fire, and as well as certainly Aleppo was exploding. And so with that, we wanted to talk to the Russians. As you saw in the film, I had once met Putin. And so we went to Moscow to try to see if we would get Putin to talk, and we were going to talk to the United States, and we were going to talk to the Jordanians, we were going to, you know, all the primary actors. And we went into a dinner with Dmitry Peskov in Moscow, and to argue that we should have time with the president. And I'll tell you two things that came up, but first I'll tell you the first thing that came up. The first thing that came up with somebody, the spokesperson for a head of state, who knows they're talking to foreigners who are going to have an impression. And he's talking to us, people he doesn't know, about how, oh, well, his son's pissed off at him right now because he was fucking his mistress in London, and this just a sleazy outpouring of, look what I get because I'm so powerful. And then there was, well, you know, the president's quite busy because he's in an election. I said, that's it, because we actually want to talk to Navalny. It was at that time when Navalny was the opposition in country. And I said, we want to talk to him about, oh, Navalny, you know what, nobody cares, he's a joke. I said, well, if he's a joke, why doesn't the president have time to talk to us in the election cycle? And so, would I have wanted to talk to him? No, no. The only, I'm not interested in his answers. I know who he is now. He murdered your babies. He murdered my babies, because they're the same babies that he's murdering and raping and torturing and stealing children en masse and reschooling them to hate their parents and their country. And we're allowing it. We're allowing it. All of us are not doing enough on this. And that will create the path of where our children's future goes. So how much are we loving our children? Do I want to talk to him? No. I want to talk at him. I want this film, and it is translated in Russian, and we are doing everything we can. I've given it to every intelligence agency in the world and pushing it forward into every VPN, because Russians should see this film. There's nothing Vladimir Putin can say to take back what he's done. There's nothing to talk to that boring man about.
There was also a question about Steven Seagal.
There are people who wish the death of Putin. I wish the support of Steven Seagal to Putin. I mean, Steven Seagal.
I'm being shown, alas, that our time is up or almost up. So I'll just end it with one brief question. And of course, all such meetings are all too short. You are a director of feature films. A few days ago, we saw you here at this festival as an actor in Black Flies, now as a director of this documentary film. I'm wondering how you see your priorities at this stage of your life, both personally and artistically, and will there be a follow-up to this movie?
Kids, carpentry, dogs, and a girl named Olga.
I guess the answer, no movies. No, I'm sure we'll see you on the big screen. Somehow I'm willing to bet quite a bit on it. Gentlemen, thank you from flying for afar to be here in the city of Toruń at the Camerimage Film Festival. Thank you all for being here, and good luck to you with wherever life takes you.
Thank you. Thank you.